We are live.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rabbi Gordon Yaffe. I'm the rabbi at Congregation Lador Vador, the Oakland Little Neck Jewish Center in Little Neck, New York. And I am being joined here today by 4 members of our congregation and 4 Israeli friends who are going to be engaged in a discussion on very important issues that are confronting Israel and the Jewish people. And this is the first of what I hope will be a series of opportunities for American Jews and Israeli Jews to share ideas. There is a growing gap between the understanding of Israel from an American Jewish perspective and an Israeli Jewish perspective. And I wanted to take just a brief moment to speak about how Israel has always and forever been at the very core of Jewish identity, going all the way back to the biblical Abraham, when God called to Abraham and said, "Go to a land that I will show you, and there you will be a great nation." And so we are the descendants of that promise, a great nation. It's been a history of exile and return. There have been periods in history where we have been in the land, and then we have had periods of history where we have been exiled out of the land, and we are living in a magnificent period in history where we have returned. And this is the first time in many, many years that there is a majority of Jews living in Israel. And what's very, very important is that as Jews, we look upon ourselves as members of a people, as a family, and we are all one. And sometimes within a family, there are family members that don't agree with one another, and there are rifts. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are families where people don't talk to one another. Well, that's something that we want to get rid of, and that we may agree to disagree. But in the meantime, we need to have a dialogue. We need to hear from one another. We need to understand perspectives that are based on the reality of living in the land and everything that that brings with it, and living outside of the land and everything that that brings with it. These are very, very important realities of our own reality. But with Israel in the world, I have been a rabbi for now 30 years, and I have been telling my congregations for the entire time that without Israel on the map, our own identity would be in danger, and that in order for Jews to be Jews throughout the world, Israel is an important reality. We know all too much that when there was not an Israel on the map in the current period, a third of our people were eliminated because there was no place to go. So that's just a few brief words of introduction. And we have today a facilitator. His name is Paul Sacker, a very active member of our congregation, who is a trained facilitator and mediator, who has shared with us his wisdom of getting people together like we are today, so that we can all hear one another, so that we can all have a great respect for one another, and so on and so forth. So, Paul, I'm going to ask you to share with our general audience the rules for today and how we're going to proceed.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you to all our participants and our audience. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly. Of course, where is it? Oh, it's here. Okay, so there are some guidelines that we have established for today's discussion. I'm going to go over them briefly. I put them on the screen briefly for you all to see. It's important that each speaker is going to speak their mind without interruption. We have an order, and each speaker will have an opportunity to speak. The order changes with each question. And we ask that while that speaker speaks, the others please do not interrupt or refrain from interrupting or jumping in. It's important that everyone speak without interruption. We ask that everyone stay on topic. That should be no straying off topics or going off there. Very important rule here. No arguments, criticisms, or judgmental statements toward others. Even if we disagree with something somebody previously has said. It's important that you speak your mind and that you give your opinion. Someone else may give an opposing opinion that you don't agree with or whatever. So if you're going to address it, we ask that you use a passive language such as, well, the way I see it is, or from my point of view, it's this way, rather than say something like, I disagree with so-and-so, or, the idea of XYZ is wrong. This is not a debate. We're here to learn from each other, listen to each other. This is not about winning here or getting a particular viewpoint to become the dominant viewpoint. We're here to all share and listen to each other. So that's very important. And lastly, the most important rule, please, we ask each speaker take no more than about 2 minutes before passing on the torch to the next speaker. It's very important that we keep our answers brief and focused so that everybody has a chance to talk. We ask no soapboxing, filibustering. I will watch the clock, and if I feel somebody's going over the roughly 2 minutes, I will be fair and give people a chance to finish something they're saying. But if I feel people are going over the 2 minutes, I will interrupt myself, or I will maybe make a cough sound or some way get their attention to say it's time to move on. With that, I think that's it for this. So I will stop sharing my screen. Everybody is good on the rules and understand that? In that case, I think we're ready for the first question, Rabbi.
Okay, yeah, we were going to do, but in interest of time, I know I asked everybody for bios and so on, and I think that through our discussions, the people who are watching are going to get to know each other, and if we have a little bit of time at the end, maybe we'll do some of that, but I don't want to take another 10 minutes to introduce everybody. I'm just so delighted that we have members of our congregation and friends who are here from Israel. It's 6 o'clock in the evening in Israel at the moment. And what a wonderful reality that we're able to be here. This is one of the things that this pandemic that we're all living through has motivated. A lot of horrible things, and a lot of deaths, and all kinds of very difficult realities. But one of the great realities is it has motivated all kinds of things that have never happened before. And I'm really honored and privileged indeed to be here. So I'm going to be asking the questions. And this is a question that was encouraged actually by our Israeli friends. And I thought we would start with this question because it is extremely important to sort of set the idea for one of the reasons why it is that we are here. So the first question for everyone, and you all have the questions in front of you, but I'm going to share it for all those who are watching. And I'm sorry, but I forgot to hit record. So I'm going to hit record.
We're recording on my end.
You're recording anyway. Oh, good. Thank you. Okay.
Somehow, we lost Henry, but hopefully he'll come back.
Oh, okay. So the first question is, what do you think the role of American Jewish opinion should be in the determination of Israeli policies? There is a very strong American Jewish community, and there are lots of opinions. So the question is, what should be that role, and how important or how unimportant is the role of American opinion? Paul, can you
yes.
call on
Stanley, you are the first on the list to answer this. You're on mute.
You're on mute. You can't be mute.
Stanley, you have to unmute.
I did. I unmuted. I got it. So it was funny. I just made some notes on that. From my perspective, I think that the American community's voices, which is multifaceted and multi-sided, can be heard in Israel. But look, I don't live in Israel. I don't pay taxes in Israel. My children haven't been in the army in Israel. It's not for American Jews to decide Israeli policies. I think that's up to Israeli citizens to do that. They can hear us and listen to us because there is also, side things to this, such as fundraising, et cetera. But it's not for us to determine Israeli policies when it comes to politics. My only objection is that the chief rabbis, both the Sephardi, have created themselves into be what's basically a pope type situation where they rule or try to rule with an iron fist, and the voices of moderate American Jewry are not heard. That's the issue at the end about the Western Wall. But I think that's a key issue. I think that's a key issue in Israel also. We had that, as Marc raised that last time we had this discussion, that this is a big problem where American voices should be heard. But it's not for me to interfere in American politics. I can belong to AIPAC, and I can be a Zionist, and I belong to Merkaz and all that, and express my opinion. But as long as I don't live, and the same thing goes on the other hand, with the American citizens who are permanent residents of Israel, it's not for them to say what goes on here too, because they're not affected. They may still be paying US taxes, but they're not affected on a day-to-day basis by what goes on in the United States. And I think that's my thought process on this.
All right, thank you, Stanley. Eric, you're next on our list. Eric.
Okay. Hi, first of all, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Marc, for inviting me. First of all, it's a great question, and I'm going to relate to it in the way that it was actually put out there, because it's really a question of the role of the opinions of diaspora Jewry. Because it says, for example, American Jewish opinion, as if it is a monolith, and obviously that is not the case at all in America or in any healthy community. There shouldn't be a monolithic way of thinking things. And it also is one community of many. My wife is originally from Holland, so there is a Dutch Jewish community. There are other large Jewish communities out there that have very strong connections with Israel. And so then the question becomes, what is Israel's relationship to the diaspora, the world of the diaspora Jewry, and how do those opinions factor into our decision making? So obviously everybody's entitled to and should voice their opinion in whatever way makes sense. But in this respect, I definitely agree with Stanley that in democracies, really the way to effectuate change is actually through voting in the democratic process. And that's a very brilliant system in the fact that those people doing the voting on a particular policy, et cetera, are going to be the ones impacted by that. So if we determine that a certain policy makes sense for us, or we voted it in, at least the majority, et cetera, and we suffer the consequences of that, or we enjoy the fruits of that particular decision, then it's all on us. Obviously, I think that the American Jewish community has a very important role of voicing their many opinions to Israel, because the American Jewish community is second in importance, in my opinion, in the entire world, except for the fact of Israel. So I would say that if it were any other way, if the opinions of American Jews or Jews in the diaspora weighed more than or even equal to the opinions regarding Israelis hold regarding policy, then it would sort of be a delegitimization of our experience living here. And I don't think that anybody would be served by that sort of opinion.
Thank you, Eric. Lindsey, you are next to answer the question, and you are mute, so. Okay, thanks.
I think like my primary was to criticize or look more into like the US's relationship to Israel and, respond to that, especially now when it's extremely strong, but, I may not agree with all the, even domestically, what our administration is doing. I think when it comes to Israel, like you said, I don't really vote there. I can have a perspective as an American Jew. I think one of my main kind of tasks is to learn more about Israeli history and policy. And I don't live there, but I can just comment on what America is doing in Israel and what that relationship is.
Thank you. We didn't once. I know I'm not supposed to say anything, but I just want to let everybody know that that Lindsey just graduated from SUNY New Paltz and was a major in international relations with a focus on Middle East, the Middle Eastern affairs. Just so everybody knows that. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Matt, you're next on the list.
I pretty much agree with what's been said till now. And as an Israeli, I would say that I especially agree with those who think that ultimately it's our decision here how we're going to govern ourselves and establish our policies. However, having just come back from 15 years in the States, where I was constantly being solicited by every possible Israeli organization and body, I realized that there has to be accountability. And so Israeli policy needs to be determined by the Israeli people, the citizens of this country, all the citizens of this country. But we also need to take into account what it is we are asking of Jews and others abroad when we turn to them and ask for support for everything from our hospitals and universities to the army or to political parties. And so we have to recognize that the decisions we make will not be dismissed by the Americans or other Jews abroad who are giving funds and giving their time and giving their energy to support what we do in this country. We have to be accountable. So whether you're going to support the right or the left, choose to support Shaarei Tzedek or Hadassah, you want to know where your money is going if you're an American Jew, and you have a right to enter into a dialogue and a conversation where it's clear to the beneficiaries here what the cost of that solicitation is. It doesn't come free. I say that because one of the most enlightening experiences I had during my time in the States took place when I was working with a junior in Chicago who got up and gave his final sermon at our synagogue and said, I was born after the Yom Kippur War. I have no memories of the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War. My only experiences of Israel are the Israel of the period since 1974 or 75 when he was born. That's a very different place to be than where I am as a child who walked around the public school I went to in Queens, holding a transistor radio during June of 1967, waiting to hear what was going to happen in Israel because of the kind of connection my family had to Israel. So if we want Jews abroad to be involved in the state of Israel, we have to make sure that we are on some kind of common wavelength, whatever that is. It may not be on the political spectrum, but it may be in other areas. It may have to do with culture, it may have to do with religion, it may have to do with literature, whatever it is, we need to find the places where we can come together and see that we do have not only a common historical past, but we have a stake in each other's future.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Next, we have Henry.
Okay,
Yeah, I hear you.
Good.
on, okay. I saw this as being a two-part question, actually. The first part to me is, how much actual influence do American Jews have now and in the future on the Israeli politics? And is that influence declining or growing? And do American Jews need to do more to ensure that the Israeli political establishment continues to hear our voice? So the second part is, assuming we still do have meaningful influence, what should we do with it? So on the first point, America in general, not just American Jews, has great influence on Israel, obviously. Israel is America's Israel's only great power supporter. Even second-tier supporters that we used to have in Europe have distanced themselves from many recent Israeli moves, especially past and future annexations. The current US administration pays close attention to important parts of its base, evangelical Christians who are pro-Israel and right-leaning American Jews. It's uncertain if this base will still be as influential in US politics in 2021. Netanyahu hears this part of American Jewry very well, I think, and it's uncertain how much he hears Jews politically opposed to annexation. On the second point, the Israeli government may change course in the next 18 months or even less. A different subset of American Jewry might become more influential and may support Benny Gantz to move in other directions. American Jews of any political persuasion have the power and right to be heard. And these opinions are most powerfully heard in Israel when they're used to influence US politics. The end.
Thank you, Henry. Stuart, you are next.
Yeah.
You are,
No, all good. Perfect. Again, I join with Eric. Thank you for this opportunity, the congregation, the door. Again, a lot has been said here that I agree with mostly, particularly Eric's point of view. Is there only American Jewish opinion? Perhaps we should also listen to Australian Jewish opinion or Dutch Jewish opinion. They also are vibrant Jewish communities that couldn't theoretically have influence. I want to emphasize 2 points. There have been many that have been said here. I just want to add two points. Building on Stanley, I think one could look at certain policies that American Jewry certainly has the right or obligation, however you like to do it. In fact, as an Israeli, I would like to hear their voice on certain issues. And then there are other issues that I'm not sure that their voice should carry enough sway. With the classic skin in the game, talking about foreign policy issues for Israel, whether they should either annex or do something about even from the right or from the left. You can hear the voices from the right go in and crush Gaza, or the voices from the left saying, no, you must leave Gaza, et cetera, et cetera. That my son, Marc's son, my son now currently in the army. I'm not sure I want people outside here who don't really have skin in the game to influence the lives of those young men and women who are serving, and who, not only young men and women, all of us who sit here in Israel and have to face the consequences of these issues. And that's just one point I'd like to make. However, issues like Jewish pluralism, which is certainly something that is dear to the heart of American Jewry, more so than Israeli Jewry, where the Americans and others outside of Israel have experience and know-how and expertise. I do want to hear what they have to say about it, and I think that Israel is indeed the land of all Jews, and in those situations, I'd like to hear what they have to say. Now, my second point, and this I want to turn it on its head here, is there a parallel universe where we would have a Zoom call that initiated in a different way? And if someone were to ask a question, should the Israeli government or should Israelis have a say on Jewish communal life in America? But the same thing, would American Jews be welcome to Israel influencing their own Jewish life, how they run their Jewish communities, how they run their synagogues, how they run all the federation system? Do we ask that question? Why is that not as legitimate? And so to entertain the thought that if these two great communities are equal, part of the same fabric, then I think we must entertain the fact that if you want it one way, I think we have to entertain the notion that it could also go the other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Next is Eva.
So I think we have to distinguish between all being, as the rabbi said, a Jewish family and being part of a sovereign state, an independent, democratically run sovereign state. And I think while I may have an opinion on what Israel should do or not do, I can express that opinion. Everybody can express their opinion, but I feel the American Jewish community and myself also, we need a little bit of humility. We lack humility because we go over the line. And I give as an example today, I read that Bernie Sanders addressed a rally in Israel against the, annexation. Now, to me, that's inappropriate. It's inappropriate. And there are people who actively lobby against certain things Israel decides to do or not to do. They have agendas. They're tied to American politics, whether it's to the right or to the left. And to me, that's kind of interference. And just because I'm giving a lot of money, I happen to run Hadassah here at North Shore Towers to raise money for Hadassah Hospital. The accountability that I would want is to see what's Hadassah Hospital doing, because I'm giving money there and I'm helping raise money. So that's the kind of accountability I agree that we should get. But I really am opposed to interfering and telling Israel what to do, because it is a democracy, and I want to distinguish it from something like Hong Kong, because supporting demonstrations or being for freedom in Hong Kong, that's to keep them from an authoritarian, fascist, communist regime. But Israel's a democracy. So even though I'm a Jew, I'm not a born American, but I'm an American citizen at this point. I'm a Holocaust survivor. My goal is to voice my opinion to each other at the temple, to my family, to my friends, to Israelis, but not to pressure Israel. I don't like the pressuring that goes on one side or the other. I don't think that's fair. And I think a good point was made about how would we like it here if France told us how to run things, or any other sovereign state. Israel's a sovereign state, and they should be allowed to do what they can do. And it's they that pay the price, especially with something like annexation.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Eva. To wrap it up, we have Marc.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to everybody in Israel. I want to make the first thing I want to say is that I think that the relationship between the United States and Israel, and more specifically the relationship between American and Jews and the state of Israel has evolved. I would say for the first 30 years of the existence of the state of Israel, and probably even longer, for the 40, up until about 1990, with the influx of Jews from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, Israel was like the child and American Jews were like the parent. We were very dependent for funding on America, not only the American government, where we had incredible help from the American Jewish community lobbying the American government to support Israel, but also on a whole host of other projects where American Jewry was extremely influential in raising funds for Israel. I'll never forget, Yom Kippur in 1973 when Rabbi Henry Dicker at Marathon Jewish Community Center, when I was sitting as I think a 7-year-old, when he got up to speak and said, "We need to open the pocketbooks," and the money flowed like probably no other time in the history of the Jewish people, how much money was raised by American Jews and to support Israel. But I think the situation has changed. Israel is no longer the child, and in many ways, Israel is now the adult child treating the elderly parent, which is just the example that American Jews, which while Israel has grown exponentially, is either staying stagnant or shrinking the American Jewish community. And I agree with the others that have said, our skin is in the game. I'm in Israel for 22 years, and I don't vote in American elections, I have plenty of opinions about American politics, but I don't vote in American elections, and the consequences of American elections don't really affect me, other than taxes that we have to pay as American citizens. I've used the analogy in the past, and I think it's apropos today. I'm a big sports fan, and no matter how much of a fan I am, and sitting in the stands, I have extremely little influence with what happens on the field. And I could be supportive, and the team can ask me to come to games and spend my money, and to even put on the scoreboard that I should make a lot of noise right now. But at the end of the day, I make very little impact on what happens between the lines. For me, the most egregious
Marc,
issue,
we've kind of passed the 2 minutes, so.
okay, I just want to wrap up on one thing. The most egregious thing for me is when I hear both the President of the United States and American Jewish leaders tell me what they think is best for Israel, when we have a democratically elected government that knows what's best for Israel. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And sorry, again, I'm trying to be fair with the time. I'm watching the clock, and 2 minutes is a very short amount of time, I know, but so everyone's going over a little bit, but that's okay. So but keep in mind, I'm not trying to be rude and cut anyone off. All right, we are ready now, Rabbi, for the second question.
Okay. I'm going to take my prerogative to say that in the next go around, I think that question is going to be tweaked to say, what is the best way they ask for opinions to be heard? Because I think that the question is, and it was mentioned that that perhaps the voice does need to be heard, but the question is, well, how does that happen? So the next question begins a set of questions that are at the core of some of the concern that Jews have all over the world about how it is that Israel is relating to the rest of the world. And so the question is that you all received is that different solutions to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have been suggested. So the question is, what solution would you like to see Israel pursue? And what do you think of the current course toward annexation of territories in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria? It's time for us to hear what our panelists have to say.
All right, thank you, Rabbi. Lindsey, you are the first to answer this question.
So as a student, like I took a I guess you can call American perspective class. But I took a class about Israel's history that includes like the West Bank and like what led us up to where we are now. And I'll speak on what the United States is doing, because like I've heard that the Israelis here and like I completely agree that I don't vote there. I can't really say what's right and what's wrong. But I can speak to like what our president is doing, who I'm not a fan of. I'll just say it right here. But he's really trying to push for annexation. I don't think that's the route, but the West Bank is an extremely complicated area, which I fully don't understand. There's different communities there. It's hard to like separate Israelis from Palestinians in that area. But when it comes to annexation and the West Bank, I just, as a American Jew that leans towards the left, I think, like, where do human rights factor into this? As America, we're a contradiction. We push for human rights, but in our own country, we don't always have them. So I think, with Trump pushing for annexation, what does that say about our goals in American foreign policy? And yeah, so that's it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lindsey. Matt, you're next.
Okay, I never took political science or governmental studies in college. In my youth, my reckless youth, I used to attend meetings of an organization called Beitar on Main Street, opposite Booth Memorial Hospital. You met above a drugstore, opposite the Carvel that doesn't exist there anymore. And my father, who was a labor Zionist, wanted to throw me out of the house for joining Beitar. But I came to Israel, and the reality of raising children here, the reality of seeing that there is no consensus on a number of issues, except one, that everybody or nearly everybody serves in the army. The reality that some will be making the ultimate sacrifice. And having lived through several of those wars where my kids were in the front lines, even my daughter, made a huge impact on my own thinking and my own priorities. And I began to think about what I would do in the ideal world where I was meeting my needs, my beliefs, and what I need to do practically. The fact that there was a demonstration yesterday, the fact that there were thousands who went to that demonstration despite the coronavirus, and the fact that in the newspapers, people I usually consider to be on the right are saying this is not the time. When the economy is falling apart and Israel has to worry about other things than Netanyahu taking advantage of the possibility that these are Trump's last months in office, makes me think that we have to be very, very careful about which priorities we put first. It doesn't mean that somebody who wants what we used to call Shtei Gadot LaYarden, two sides of the Jordan River belong to us, doesn't mean they give up that dream. But what will be the cost? What will be the cost in terms of human life? What will be the cost to the economy? What will be the cost to Israel's status in the world? Those are serious issues. And when my kids were on the front lines, I had to make sure that they were there because they thought that was the place to be. One of the things that the young generation in Israel often says, and is not often heard, is that we're not subscribing to all of the directions that our government wants us to protect, to guarantee, and we want to have a voice in that. And there is resistance amongst the young generation here, parallel to the movement towards the left in America. So we have to be careful. I don't want to take a position. I don't think it's right for me to take a position because I carry the title rabbi, but I think we have to make smart decisions and not necessarily the right decision.
Thank you, Matt. Henry, you are up next.
Okay. In my opinion, the current course that Netanyahu is steering toward extending Israeli sovereignty over about 30% of the so-called West Bank in July doesn't seem to be a solution to anything. And opposition is growing to this. The White House spoke in this past week with Bibi about slowing down annexation plans. Israeli settlers are opposed to Bibi's plan because it limits future settlement growth. On the Palestinian side, there are threats of a third intifada. Many people feel this action taken at this particular time is really has the impact of being a political ploy for the benefit of Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay, the long-term problem that we have is that Israel, it's a cliche, has no one to negotiate with. It's been a cliche for a long time goes. And the political wisdom, I think, in the past has been that no solution is better than a bad solution. And I can understand that Israelis are exhausted by the Palestine Authority's intransigence. The Sunni and Shia Arabs have been fighting for 1,200 years and are still unable to resolve their differences. We can't wait that long. Okay, Mahmoud Abbas of the PA is incapable of resolution of our issues. Painful as it is, I believe in waiting. My feeling is the best solution is waiting for a new generation of leaders of the Palestine Authority. And we need to cultivate ties with potential future leaders of the West Bank, possibly enlisting quiet support from other Arab nations, which are also tired of the issue. The Arab states, many of them are quietly talking to Israel, like the Saudis, about they're looking to confront Iran in partnership with Israel. Maybe we can use these ties to put influence on the next generation of Palestinian leaders to get their help while it's available. And that concludes.
Thank you, Henry. Oh, Stuart, you are next.
So in the next 2 minutes, I'll be able to solve the whole issue. So thanks for this opportunity. Yeah. When I saw the question, I was like, oh, that's it? That's all you want to know?
It was originally 2 questions, but we tried to make it a little quicker.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Listen, this is, of course, the forum here is with all our brain power. We'll give it a shot. Again, I want to point out a couple of points here. The way I read the question, I think our in the grand scheme, the end game would look something like that. There would be some version of a 2-state solution with people with Palestinians and Jews living side by side. And to join Henry's voice, that's not going to be tomorrow, Henry. That's going to be in a long time, but we have to manage it until then. 2 things I do want to point out, though, about the intransigence, and we said that, and my friend Marc and I speak about this often, how in certain cases, it's in our opinion, the Palestinians have gotten have been infantilized by Western democracies and have been allowed to get away with things that we wouldn't allow other countries to get away with. And if you listen to the Palestinian rhetoric, which is we often hear that we'd hear about, they don't talk about a 2-state solution, not because I don't believe they would be satisfied with the 67 borders. This annexation plan, again, Israel's talked about it for years, has never gone through with it. Trump's suggestion put it in their mind. And I think that it came out of, for certain people on the right, it was a gift in their eyes. And then it turned out to be maybe a Trojan horse, as Henry pointed out. That, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right time for it. And really just what we're talking about here, I mean, I'm not sure it's a human rights issue. Where the 30% about we're speaking are where Jews live over in what's called Judea and Samaria. One last point that I want to make about that is that I believe that it is anathema and it is obscene that we entertain any notion that Jews will not be allowed to live in any part of this land. That we would allow at one point a solution to be that Jews would not be allowed to live in Hebron, wherever they want to live. And I think that to me is that to me is something that I can't stomach. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Eva, you are next.
So I don't have a solution to a somewhat difficult problem, and I'm hearing from the Israelis that it's very conflicted in Israel as well. So I did not get a call from the government or from Mossad, and nobody told me what's going on behind the scenes. So I really don't know whether it is a good idea or not, but what I do know is that if Trump is voted out, Israel will not have a chance to make what is already a fact on the ground a reality. And it was also Geschrei that happened with the moving of the embassy. The world was going to come to an end. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have a child that's on the front lines in Israel. So it's really, I'm being consistent with what I said before. It's really up to the Israelis and the ones who are behind the scenes negotiating with Arab states, and the Arab states seem to not be terribly upset. Is this the right time to do this? And all you're really doing with annexation is to say the people who live in the settlement, the large settlements that are cities by now, are part of Israel. I mean, it's a symbolic thing from what I understand, more than changing any facts on the ground. But as has been said, we're not going to remove Jews from the West Bank. I mean, that's ethnic cleansing, and we wouldn't accept ethnically cleansing Palestinians or Arabs out of Israel. So why would we accept removing Israelis? And if the Israelis live in, Ariel or wherever else this is, I think the Israelis have to make a decision, but it's a big risk, obviously. It's a dangerous step, but I think that everybody expects Trump to be voted out after a pandemic and the riots and everything else. When you get a leftist government in here, it's not going to be good for Israel. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Eva. Marc, you are next.
Well, with that positive note, I will. So the question that was put to us, I just want to read the question again. Different solutions to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have been suggested. What solution would you like to see Israel pursue? And what do I think about the annexation? So the first thing I want to say is, I think if the Trump peace plan was authored by anybody other than Donald Trump, if it was authored by Dennis Ross and David Makowski, it would have been the darling of the left wing. And if it was offered in 1993, just after the signing of Oslo, it would have been signed off by about 80% of Israel, probably more, probably 90% of Israel. I think that this plan, in the 22 years that I've been living here, and since Oslo was signed in 1993, I think this is the first realistic plan that exists that takes into account the realities on the ground in Israel and moves it from a religious conflict and an ethnic cleansing conflict to a integration of Israeli and Palestinian society. I believe that peace will only come when the Palestinians fully accept that Israel exists, and that Israel exists not only in the pre-67 lines, but in Gush Etzion, where it's been since 1967, Ma'ale Adumim, which is a quote-unquote settlement of tens of thousands of people, and the Jordan Valley is in Israel's control, where it will limit the ability of the Palestinian entity to join with Jordan and from a military base. I think that the Trump plan is a very realistic plan. I think the fact that Mahmoud Abbas and left-wing Americans refuse to deal with the plan makes anything, we have nobody to negotiate with. When the plan was introduced, it was called for comments from the Palestinians. They choose to not comment. They haven't spoken to the Israeli government since 2014, I believe. And at certain points, I think Israel does have to look out for its best interests. As Eva said, in 1981, when Menachem Begin annexed the Golan Heights, Ronald Reagan was very angry at him. Ronald Reagan was a big supporter of Israel. He was very angry. But lo and behold, it turned out to be a pretty good move, I'd say, when you have 11 million Syrian refugees that have left Syria in the last couple of years because of the civil war. I think the same thing goes for annexing Jerusalem when they did, and I think moving the embassy. So I think this plan is a good plan. I think if people were looking at it realistically and not just being against it because it was a Trump plan, I think you'd have a lot of support for it. I think there are also a lot of people who've made a lot of money on being two-state solution people. The two-state solution did not come from Sinai. I know that a lot of people do believe that, but that's what I believe.
All right, thank you, Marc. Stan.
Wait, Stan, you're muted, and we need to unmute you.
I got it. So this is a multifaceted question that no one can answer in 2 minutes, but I'll say this. I've been a firm believer that if the Palestinians had jobs and education and housing, they wouldn't erupt into all these civil disobedience and criminal acts that they perform. But that's wrong. I was wrong. It doesn't work. The Palestinians have been hijacked by the religious fanatics in Iran. We noticed that Hamas rules Gaza after we gave it up. So that was a failure on our part. It doesn't work because they're only terrorists, and the Palestinians with a 40 or 45% unemployment rate in Gaza doesn't have the courage or the morals, doesn't have the courage to stand up to Hamas's rulers, and they are suffering. On the other hand, on the West Bank, you have a boss who's a criminal and a crook. Look at his two kids. They control a substantial portion of the economy in the West Bank, and they make millions off of their own people. Abbas doesn't have an interest in the world in making peace with Israel. So that leads me to the other thing. I'm not knowledgeable on this West Bank issue and annexation. I haven't read about it. I haven't studied it. But I'm just wondering, if Israel does this, do they have even the financial ability to absorb these people? Will these people become citizens of Israel? That presents another problem that I have. We know that the Arabs or the Palestinians who reside in the state of Israel aren't required to perform military service. And I always wondered about that. In any other country in the world, if you have a military and you have a conscription, they didn't ask what religion you were, right? You lived in Europe, you lived in America, you got, my draft card disappeared years ago, but I had a draft card, and so did my Christian friends. Nobody asked me what religion I was. If the Palestinians who live in Israel and pay taxes and receive the benefits of the social society, the health and everything else, if they don't want to serve in the military, what else do they do? I don't know the answer to this, but this is going to be a humongous problem if we annex the West Bank, because all you're going to do is rile up the Iranians, and they're going to send more stuff to Hezbollah in the north, and we'll have more violence. I am tired of the violence. I don't live in Sderot, but I wouldn't want to live there. I don't think I could live there with my children. Know that every 5 minutes I have to be afraid. I have 30 seconds to get into a bomb shelter, or know that they're digging a tunnel under my house. Nobody wants to live like that. And that's part of the issue. It's not just the annexation, it's the whole picture, but you'll never have peace as long as Hamas and Abbas are in power. Never happen.
Right. Thank you, Stanley. This one up, we have Eric.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I think it's interesting to note that today is June 7th, 2020, which means 53 years ago today, Jerusalem was liberated. In the war, they were all still grappling with, at least according to the Gregorian calendar. So I just throw that out there. I live in Gush Etzion, which is one of the areas in which I guess is apparently up for annexation. I have to say, I am very uncomfortable when any US president decides to make peace in the Middle East. From my experience, it literally leads to bloodshed and war. And it's like somebody coming over to stir the pot for no good reason, because it engenders two reactions within the populations here. One, the Israelis, hey, wait a minute, we can't be endangered by this, and we need to take steps in order to make sure that we're protected. B, on the Palestinian side, wait a minute, if we make noise, if we take it and push it, to more extreme levels, maybe we'll get a better deal. So this deal of the century, when this guy mentioned it, I was already like, a smart president would leave this place alone, because I think really no solution is better than a bad solution. So I'll just throw that out there. The other element of annexation, and by the way, I think we're talking about annexing small areas which would not include Palestinians, because I don't think they want to become part of the Jewish state. But nevertheless, the annexation is only one side of this. The reason why on the right in Israel, there is a lot of concern about the Trump plan, is because the flip side of annexation means a Palestinian state in areas that were not annexed. And I have to show you, and I did this on purpose, but my background here, which is a beautiful background, I don't really know how to get out of the way of it, but it was taken this winter from an airplane. And if you could see to my, I don't know, whatever, that direction is Tel Aviv, the city there. And way in the distance on the upper right is a little white mountain. That little white mountain is actually a pretty big white mountain called Mount Hermon, where people can ski. It's on the border of Syria and Lebanon. Okay, we can see by flying on an airplane the entire northern section of Israel, one half of the country. Where my head is right now, 80% of the Israeli population live. We have tried ethnic cleansing on the part of Israelis, right? We removed 8,000 people from the Gaza Strip and 15 years ago, actually, right? It didn't turn out so well, right? It was supposed to allow the Palestinians to show to us with no strings attached, how are you going to build something here? And the only thing they built were things to destroy us and to make our lives miserable. And they've done a pretty good job at it, I have to say. Where I live, in a place called Neve Daniel, I can literally stand at the top of the mountain and I can do two things. One way I look and I can see from basically Gaza, if it's nighttime, definitely Ashkelon, the sea, boats in the sea, ships in the sea, all the way to Tel Aviv. There you go, Rabbi Matt, right? And if I turn, and Tel Aviv, okay? And I can turn around and I can see Amman, the capital of Jordan, okay? If we are dumb enough to give up the strategic value of the mountain range that runs north-south through what's called the West Bank or Judea Samaria, because of pressure from somebody, whether it's a president that likes us or doesn't like us, and create a strategically superior Gaza Strip or Lebanon in our heartland, both our spiritual and Jewish heartland, and one that absolutely controls most of the Israeli population, then we haven't done what needs to be done in terms of thinking clearly. I'll say the following thing and then I'll end it. Jimmy Carter came to Neve Daniel, where I live, in 2009. And he had never been here. So of course, all his policies against settlements and communities and so on and so forth is based on theory, which is the same with a lot of us, right? But he said the following thing: this particular settlement area, meaning Gush Etzion, is not one I can envision ever being abandoned or changed into Palestinian territory. This is a part of settlements close to the 67 line that I think will be here forever. Jimmy Carter is not a big supporter of Israel. He's definitely not a big supporter of right-wing Israelis and settlements. But your own eyes, if somebody is fair-minded, will see it and say, you got a problem here at the very least. I don't know if annexation, the way that Trump has put it out there, is the solution. I really do not, because I'm not sure exactly what the material value is. But there is a value in signaling to the other side. You cannot just wait forever and expect, I don't know what they're expecting anymore, things to change without putting some effort in it.
Thank you, Eric. Sorry, okay, so observation before we go on. We were scheduled for an hour and a half. The first two questions took an hour. So it's just noon right now here in New York. So the questions, we may decide to drop one of the questions. I think we talked about the last one. We may not do this time, Rabbi, unless everyone wants to go for another half an hour. It's up to you guys. Rabbi, what do you want to do?
Well, I think we should do one more question and then decide that after that. The next question really speaks to the question of the relationship between diaspora Jews and Israeli Jews from really a religious point of view and a Jewish historical point of view. There is something in the prophets that says that we as Jews should be a light unto the nations. And there are a lot of people that are upset about sometimes a double standard that Israel is put up to, where everybody in the world does certain things and all of a sudden Israel has to be better, or Israel has to really answer, I'll say, to a higher power. As a rabbi and as a religious Jew, I think that that's a really important part of us, not just as Jews, as a nation with a sovereign nation that represents the Jewish people throughout the world. And we have the Prime Minister often saying, we are the Jewish nation for everyone. And so that's part of what this discussion is all about. So that's why I suggested this question: what does the prophetic vision of Israel being a light unto the nations play in your relationship to Israel? And I guess what's missing from there and maybe implied is if there are times when you feel that Israel, nobody's perfect, nobody. And when it doesn't live up to what you think is the right or the way in which we can really be an example for the rest of the world, and we are in so many ways. When we fall short, how does that impact on your love of Israel, your connection to Israel, and your feelings? I think probably that's going to be the last question, because after that there's another part of this process where we all get to go around and say, oh, okay, now that we've had this hour and a half together, what's our takeaway and how do we feel? So the question on the table is, what role does the prophetic vision of Israel what role does the prophetic vision of Israel being a light unto the nations, or Lagoyim, play in your connection and your relationship to Israel?
Thank you. Stuart, you are the first to answer this.
Lucky me. I think actually...
your smile.
I know.
A great smile.
I think a reflection of the depth of our own thought is reflected in this question. The Rabbi even said, is that how does Israel, he used the word Israel a number of times. In this context, Israel is both a nation. The Rabbi is also referring to the state of Israel, even the people of Israel, the religion of Israel, the Torah of Israel, the God of Israel, etc. I mean, and it is all in 2 minutes. We will, of course, solve this whole thing again. I would be so, I can't be so bold as to say that I speak for everyone. I'm gonna play the personal point of view here. I try to live my life by showing God's presence in this world. And how does one do it? I think that is our objective and directive that we've received from Sinai, if you will, we had last week. And that expresses itself so that in every aspect of our lives, every aspect, both the religious, what is classically ritual, but also in our professional lives, we're scrupulously honest, or we try to be honest in our business dealings. We try to use our time wisely. We don't try to waste. We try to behave ethically and morally, etc. That is my goal. My goal is, if you will, when I served in the army, I was always aware that I was a religious soldier in the Israeli army who tried to be the best soldier I could be, because I was reflecting I had a whole community behind me, and I tried to be the best at doing that. And on the other hand, to be the best, I hate to say this one, the best Jew I could be. I don't think they're so different. I think that's what our command is. The command that I've received from the same source also tells me that I need to do that in Israel, the place. And to best realize that dream, I want to do that here in Israel. In the latest up, in my heart of hearts, if I see something wrong in Israel, I feel an obligation and a desire and a will to change it here in Israel, because that is my people, my land, my family, if you will. I feel less of that connection outside of Israel. And I want to do the best here. So if I think here we're going to use a halachic phrase, in my own daled amot of halacha, in my own 4 cubits of halacha of myself, that if I do everything I can to be as good as I can be, that will reflect on the people around me, on the community around me, and both in a cosmological scheme and in a very real way on everyone else. That, I believe, that is our goal. If I see us behaving poorly, I want to change that. As some sort of, because I think that's our imperative and our directive that God has given us to make this world as good as we can, do as well as we can. And I think that's what the commandments and Torah and God have given us to do. that'll be my 2 minutes on that one.
Thank you, Stuart. Henry, you are next.
Very nice, Stuart. The Israel that's a light unto the nations, as Stuart said, includes Israel in the diaspora. And we here in America have an obligation to praise and defend our homeland when it's deserved, and to criticize it constructively when it deserves criticism. The prophets criticized Israel when it was merited, and no reason why we can't continue that tradition. Constructive criticism is really a big part of our culture, actually. The IDF debriefs those involved in military operations, and being able to debrief itself in a useful, constructive manner is an important asset. Ben-Gurion held a 3-day debriefing in July 1948 while the War for Independence was going on to review the government and military's conduct during the war. So criticism, debriefing is part of our history. Also, in the Second Lebanon War, which I researched, it was stated that one of the duties of senior officers was to argue assertively with the chief of staff when they felt he was wrong. Okay, if they can do it, so can we. But it's always constructive and for the good of Israel. And we all know that we should all be immensely proud of all the good that Israel does in the world.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Marc, you're next.
No, I think I'm next.
No, you're. No, I have Marc after Henry. Then you, Eva.
On question 3?
Yes.
Question 3.
Marc,
Eva, you can go first. You can
Don't
go.
worry about the order, just.
Okay, well, the updated one has it different. That's okay.
Yeah?
oh yeah. There is.
It was a mistake. Sorry.
I yield to the lady.
No, it's supposed to be Eva first.
No.
Okay.
On
Eva,
question 3, it's Henry.
You are correct, Eva.
Stuart,
Go.
and-
Eva, you're right.
Okay.
You're correct. My bad.
So you want me to go now?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, so I think that Israel is the light unto the nations already. And I've had the privilege, being the oldest in this group, of being alive when Israel, modern state of Israel, was founded, and seeing what's happened and the kind of morality and ethical basis for everything that Israel does as a country is unprecedented. How the IDF behaves, how the government generally behaves, and I'm not talking about the little infighting that goes on in the Knesset or that kind of stuff. I'm talking on a larger humanitarian basis. I don't think there's a country in the world that compares to it. And to me, and I'm not a supernaturalist, but I gotta say, it's really miraculous to me. And how does it influence me? I'm active in AIPAC. I'm active in Hadassah. I'm a supporter. My grandkids have all gone to Birthright. And whatever I, as an American Jew, can do to support this miracle that is a light unto the nations, although not appreciated by the rest of the world, that's what I have dedicated my life to. And that's it.
Thank you, Eva. Now, Marc.
Okay, I just want to echo what Stu said, that initially, that I think it's sometimes impossible for Israel to live up to the expectations of others. We are a light unto the nation. We have something in Israel in the army called the Home Front Command. The Home Front Command is poorly worded for what the people do, because they're the first responders to earthquakes, to floods, to famines, to anywhere in the world they're sent. And we all know what they did in Haiti, in the military hospitals that they set up. We're a country that strives for all types of human rights. I think we're the leading light in the gay movement. Tel Aviv is probably the leading gay city in the world. People flock to it from all other places. A number of Arabs have apartments in Tel Aviv because if they would come out of the closet in their countries, they would not go back into the closet. They wouldn't have a closet to go into. I think our military is a light unto all nations. If any other military conducted themselves like the state of Israel, they would lose wars. We win wars. One of my sons was training with some Marines one time when he was in the Army, and they were in a town. They were in a mock-up town, and the Marines told them, "Why do you guys go around the walls and shoot? We go through the walls and shoot." I have a nephew that I mentioned fought in the war in 2014 as a paratrooper, and before he was allowed to shoot, he had to get permission from his commander that there were no civilians in the line. We have a Supreme Court justice that is an Israeli Arab. We don't discriminate against Israeli Arabs. A little over almost 10% of the Knesset is made up of Israeli Arabs. Minorities are treated with the exact same rights as Israelis. I think we are the light unto nations, and it's an inspiration to be an Israeli. And I think every day we're walking around fulfilling the prophetic version.
Thank you, Marc. Stan, we have you next.
I really don't know how to answer that question other than, I'm thinking my grandmother used to, and I think all our grandmothers used to say, no, is good for the Yidden? Is it good for the Jews? And I think we are a light unto the nation. Marc said most of what I wanted to say. I mean, anytime there's a disaster anywhere in the world, who's the first one on the proverbial bus? It's Israel. Israel's rules of engagement are completely different than any other government's rules of engagement when it comes to war and fighting terror. So we are a light unto the nation. Unfortunately, it's not appreciated by most of the world, But then you read how Israel goes to Africa, and there's whatever the event is, and how they go in there with their, with the doctors and the first responders, and that creates a lot of goodwill that we don't read about all the time. But we do a lot of Israel does a lot of good things for themselves that aren't recognized in the rest of the world. But I think that the four of you who live there know it. And it doesn't always come out that everybody else understands it. So I think Israel is a light unto the other nations. Unfortunately, the other countries don't want to follow Israel's policies. More so, I think, when I read about the war, about the rules of engagement and what they can do and can't do, and how they question soldiers when there's something, when somebody's shot, et cetera. It's just amazing. So I don't think we have a problem per se. I think it's the perception from the rest of the world. My thought.
Thank you, Stanley. Next is Eric.
Hi, okay. The idea of light into the nation very much animates my connection to Israel. I think that I've learned that the rabbis say there are basically four levels of creation. One is domem, inanimate objects, someach, which is vegetative life, like grass, trees, etc. Chai, which means living animal life, right? And medaber, which is for humans, those who speak, okay? But there's also a concept that there is a fifth level, and that is called Yisrael. And when thinking about that, I was like, that can't mean Jews. It doesn't say Jews, it says Yisrael. And if it's talking about Yisrael, it's not talking about individuals, because it wouldn't make sense, because we're part of the larger family, obviously, of mankind, of humankind. So what is this concept of Israel? And I think it is exactly that, the collective body of the Jewish nation. So the only place that we can be a light into the nations in a major factor in ways that are known, and as was just mentioned now, in ways that are unknown to the public out there, but that are happening, is in our collective state of Israel. There's no doubt about it, as a body politic that functions here. And I'll just bring two examples that I think I'm proud of, and then talk about when we fall short. First of all, Israel is an incredibly diverse country, but there's a tremendous amount of harmony that exists between all the diversity. You only hear about the bad parts, obviously, if you look at the news. That's all you hear about, because the news is all about making people excited and, you know, hot under the collar. But where I live, settlers, Israelis who live in those communities that are condemned by all, are friendly, patronizing the same shops as Palestinians who they'll tell you are trying to destroy us. So I don't know, there's a lot of humanity that goes on. I just think, but obviously between Jews of all stripes, within Sephardic and in Ashkenaz, everything, tremendous amounts of harmony, much more than anybody will tell you, certainly more than you'll see on the news. That's number one. Number two, and I think this is super relevant for today, Israel, maybe despite what Rabbi Futterman mentioned about people coming and asking for money, so leave that aside because I don't have a lot of experience with that, but hear me out. Israel has chosen not to become a victim. And I think that the idea of victimhood sort of replacing any other positive characteristics of a human being or of a nation has become so extreme that I think the results are what we're seeing actually right now in the USA, to a degree in Israel as well. And I don't think that it does anybody any good, and not those people who actually are victims. For everybody to adopt a victim mentality and say, oh, we can't do it. How could we be expected to do anything? Because we're just victims of our own circumstances and we have no ability to improve ourselves. Israel, without any natural resources until recently found, without any water, and without a lot of the other things that so-called would seem to be absolutely essential for making a nation, those things have actually helped Israel become who it is because they didn't exist. And I would suggest to everybody to read a book called Let There Be Water by a man named Seth Siegel, I think. Unbelievable book that should be read by everybody. You'll race through it. It is absolutely fascinating. And that's just on the natural resource of water. When we fall short, as somebody asked, it causes a lot of pain, no doubt about it. And actually, I've recognized that very much during these days when I see what's going on in America, and I don't pretend to have any special knowledge of what's going on over there, that's for sure. But I see a lot of falling short on the political level, for sure. On the personal level, for sure. And it hurts. And I thought, wait a minute, why is it hurting? It feels like what happens when Israel does, but what's going on over there has been an ultimate reflection of, I care about America deeply. I care about Israel deeply. When either one of those places or people falls short from what you would expect them to act, given a certain situation, it hurts.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Lindsey, you're next. You're on mute. You're on mute. Okay.
So, as an American Jew, I'm always trying to learn more and question things. And I think a lot of other young Jews are eager to learn more about Israel and just the history. Since we're talking about Israel's history and also Israel's like a fabric of diversity, and I just hope in the future that in these kinds of discussions there's more representation of other groups. I just feel as an American Jew, I feel like right now I'm hearing a lot of different opinions and different, perspectives, and it's all really important, but I just hope to hear more in the future as well. And a lot of, so that's my statement.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Matt, you're bringing us home.
So if I'm going to give up the Yankees and the Giants, there must be a really good reason. And that is, I fully believe that in this time of our history as a people, we need to take control of our own destiny and our own history. And that's why I'm in Israel. And that connects to my concept of being a light unto the nations. I am so proud of the fact that of all the nations of the world, we're the only nation that took in thousands of people from Africa. Black people were brought here at great expense and a great effort and brought into the 20th and then the 21st century. It's not 100% successful, but I think we did a damn good job. The military is mentioned. We have a concept called Tohar Neshek, the purity of weapons, written by Professor Asher Kasher. explaining how soldiers are supposed to behave, the moral dimension of being a soldier. That's drilled into every single one of our soldiers, every single one of our kids. And we, as parents, I'll speak for myself, as a parent, I needed to make sure that my kids understood this and that they were prepared to fight as soldiers in accord with the rules of Torah and Neshek. In fact, my youngest received the President's Medal of Excellence during Operation Cast Lead because he had the job of taking his unit into a Palestinian community where they were shooting missiles into Sderot and Netivot and other towns in the south, and dismantling the buildings that the terrorists were shooting missiles from. But his first job was to get the civilians out of the building. The buildings were booby-trapped, so at great risk to the lives of our soldiers and to my son. They undid the booby traps, got the civilians to safety, and then destroyed the buildings that were being used to cover the tracks of the terrorists. I'm proud of that. At the same time, I think because we're a light to the nation, we have to be honest and critical when we see mistakes. And we also have to be complimentary when we see great successes. Mistakes like the recent decisions of the government to create the largest government, most expensive government this country's ever had, bothers me terribly because about a quarter of the workforce is out of work because the economy is in dire straits. And last night I listened to the new Minister of Higher Education and Water trying to explain to the public why it's okay for him to have the kind of staff that he has and what it's costing the country. It's ridiculous. And here people have to stand up and fight. Here we're not being an Or Goyim because the message is not really for the other nations of the world, it's to our own nation. Do we tell our people that this is our level of morality or not? Like I told my children when they went to the army, how do I tell my fellow citizens that we're behaving as a moral nation? We brought Jews from Ethiopia here in the thousands. Have we finished the job the way we're supposed to? Absolutely not. In fact, my brother is extremely involved in working and solving the problems of the children of those immigrants who came from Ethiopia. And all I hear are horror stories of what's going on. And we don't want to talk about that because as somebody who also went to AIPAC every year, we want to hear those great stories about how successful we are. We are successful, but let's be honest about the issues that could be tearing apart the souls of Israelis. And don't forget, 80% of Israelis identify as non-religious, non-Orthodox, however you want to put it. And a great many of them are so cynical about Judaism at this point that the only way to win them back is to take a stand in the name of our religious beliefs. And I will point out that the four men who are in Israel taking part in this conversation over in Kippot, and therefore I assume are Shomrei Mitzvot. We can't get that message across unless we do aspire to that higher level. It's like that old Hebrew National commercial. Remember? We answer to a higher authority. And we should.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Okay, we have gone through the three questions. Rabbi, do you want me to just explain the wrap up?
Okay, before we explain the wrap up, okay, I want to make a brief statement about the question that we're not going to address at the moment. And I want to speak to, I've been told that I was hoping there would be more, but there are at least 20 people that are watching this discussion. And we are recording this discussion. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get it to more people. And just as my role was, I authored the questions and it was not my role to answer them. But as I was listening to this wonderful discussion, I had a lot of things that I wanted to say and that I could have said that sort of would have added a different element to what's going on here. And I think Lindsey mentioned that, and when you said, Marc, that, well, we talked about having a broad range, broad perspective. We definitely have. I think, it's a great group and we heard lots of really important ideas, and it's really great to be together. What a wonderful experience we've had. But I am going to reach out to excuse me, to those who are watching, if you had any questions or comments or concerns, to put them in the little chat box that is available. And I think afterwards, I might send some emails to everyone here with some of the thoughts that I have, because that wasn't the point of my role here. The final question was about religious pluralism and the issue of the only place in the world where freedom of religious choice is compromised. And there are problems with egalitarian prayer in the focal point of the Jewish world, where everybody stands, wherever they stand, whether they're in Australia or in America, they're all focusing on the Western Wall, and the Western Wall is an Orthodox shul. And so that was going to be the question. It would take us another 20 minutes, and I think that it's always good to have a hope and an idea. Oh God, that will keep me coming back for more.
Rabbi, it's not fair for you to give your opinion if you're not going to let us give our opinion.
Oh wait, I didn't.
You're biasing all the people. I mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was trying not. You're absolutely right. I wasn't giving. I didn't think I was giving an opinion. I was just making a statement. But maybe it was an opinion. I'm sorry. Et chata'ai ani azkir hayom. Sorry. So if that's the case, I mean, if people listen, Paul and I talked about let's trying to keep to our hour and a half. If everybody, since I made a mistake and added a piece of my own feeling to that next question, if you'd like to deal with it, can I see a show of hands? How many people want to stay for another half an hour, or how many people think we need to wrap it up? Can't. Well, there's one who can, but we got two who can't. And now, okay, it looks like the majority is we will end. Okay, and there is going to be an opportunity that is part of Paul's expertise in running meetings like this, for giving everybody an opportunity to share briefly. Okay, instead of 2 minutes, it's really like a 1 minute kind of thing, as to, well, gee, now that I spent an hour and a half having this experience, what's your takeaway, and how do you feel about it? Paul, if there's anything else that you wanted to say?
We're going to just do that. It's basically just giving in a minute, your feelings. Where are you right now? How do you feel about this process? Do you feel good about it, bad about it, anything? Just where are you right now? Just speak from the heart. I'm going to use the order for the fourth question. So Eva, I'll go with you first.
Okay, I thought it was a good setup, though we couldn't really interact. But I appreciated having our Israeli friends here. Made a big difference to me to not just be talking to other American Jews, which is what I'm always doing. So I thank them for being here. And I think that one of the things about this meeting is that I think most of us agreed more than we disagreed. So I think that there wasn't any real conflict in opinion here. I don't know if the rabbi felt that way also, but I think this is a good thing. And I liked having a young person here. And probably we should have a little more of that, because I think in America, we're losing the young people. So that's what I.
Thank you. Marc, you're next.
Okay, first of all, I think that this was a really important forum. I think, as I said when I spoke in before Yom Ha'atzmaut, I think it's important for American Jews to hear the non-professional Jews. We make up the majority of what Israel is, the non-professionals, and we kind of come to things without agendas. And as Matt said, sometimes when you come to talk to Israelis, when you have American Jews, when you have an agenda, it shapes the way that you speak. I do agree with Eva that we're united with many more things than we are divided by. I do want to end by just saying, I think when Menachem Begin was when he was the opposition leader, he used to say that you fight at home and you're united abroad. I think in Israel, in America, in the Jewish world, we've lost that. We feel that we have the ability to fight in the newspapers. We're not united as a people. You know, we hear often, especially now, bipartisanship of Israel being a bipartisan issue is no longer the case. I think we need to get back to that fighting within the family, but when we're outside the family, it's time to back the country that is the family. And hopefully these kind of forums where we get to interact and see that there are multiple opinions in Israel, but the vast majority of people agree on basic common guidelines. I think hopefully we will be able to have that influence, and look forward to doing this more often, not only in this group, but maybe even in bigger forums. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc. Stan, you're next.
It's very interesting. Marc and I usually don't agree, but he's 100% right the last two times. It's really interesting.
He's my accountant, so he doesn't agree with sometimes my accountant.
It's 8 of us on the panel. That should have led to 24 opinions, at least at the minimum, but it didn't. And I think maybe because we're all in the same, except for Lindsey, we're all in the same generational age group, more or less, give or take. I'm probably the second oldest sitting here after Eva. But it's very interesting that for us, we basically agree both on the American side and on the Israeli side in so many of the issues. And I think that's what creates Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Stan. Eric. Eric, you're muted.
First of all, thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope it was useful for people listening, looking to get a different, or whatever, to hear some different opinions. I agree with Lindsey that there should be more diversity in these sort of things, because it's different perspectives, and I think it provides more food for thought, really, when it comes down to it. It's more representative of Israel than us, but nevertheless, I hope that we were able to speak from the heart, and that there's some sort of additional understanding of what our situation is, and we're of course happy to continue at any future time. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Lindsey, you're next.
Thanks for a great panel discussion. I definitely learned a lot today, and I ask that everyone, considering that we all or some of us did agree on a lot of issues, I ask that, especially for the Americans, that you talk to someone that doesn't agree with you, so maybe you can talk some things out or learn something new, because I definitely did today. Also considering what's happening in our country right now. And right after this, I'm going to read the Trump's Israel-Palestinian peace plan, because I didn't get a chance to look at it yet. So thanks for bringing it to my attention.
Great. Thank you, Lindsey. Matt, you're next.
I think the most important takeaway from any kind of conversation like this is exactly what Lindsey said. We have to talk to each other, and we have to learn the stories, the narratives that we can share with others who don't understand Israel. When I mentioned before what my son did in the army, that's only one example. People don't know that Israeli soldiers go and protect Palestinian civilians. But there are other stories. There's the story of the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, who went to comfort the family, whose Palestinian family, whose son was killed last week, an autistic young man. And the chief rabbi, amongst other Israeli leaders, went to the family's home to offer comfort. It's such a contrast to what's happening to in America right now. I think that's when we're an Or LaGoyim, a light to the nations, when we can stand up on our principles and values and share that, especially with the younger generation of Jews in America who are looking for some sort of sign that Israel is not some kind of military behemoth, apartheid state, as they've been told. And I want to conclude the story that I was going to share for the discussion of pluralism. The current minister of religions is my neighbor. Rabbi Avitan comes from Ashkelon. The shul where he davened is right next door to the shul that I served for almost 20 years as rabbi of a conservative shul in Israel, in Ashkelon, which was 90% Israeli and 80% Sephardic. And it was a great community. And we got along. We were friendly. We even co-officiated at a wedding, something I can't say publicly because it'll endanger his job as the minister of religions. But he did a great thing today. I don't know if my fellow Israelis heard this, but he solved the problem of a young non-Jewish boy in Ashdod who drowned over the weekend. And the family didn't have a place to bury him because there was no cemetery in the area for non-Jews. And Rabbi Avitan stepped in and he solved the problem. And he solved the problem at no cost to the family that has no money. And I sent him a note telling him what an honor it is to know him and to see that these are the values that the minister of religions brings to the job, that the rabbi who becomes the minister of religions brings to the job, showing how we value the needs of each and every individual in this country. So some good stories to take back to your communities to share about the good things that are happening in Israel. And to know that there are challenges still happening.
Let's let Henry and Stuart finish.
Okay.
Henry, you're next.
I was very happy to be part of this. It was very eye-opening in some respects. I'd like to make one suggestion. Maybe we could look at the format and see if this is the same format that we have to have in all future sessions. We might want fewer questions with some interactive input, make it like a real discussion session on some topics, and some might not. But it might be stimulating to have live commentary and back and forth on various issues.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you. Stuart, you're last.
Well, Eva, thank you for calling me the youngest person on the panel. Thank you. There was one young person. I don't know who you were referring to. Thank you. For me, again, thank you for allowing us to participate here. I want to compliment the congregation here. The very fact that you're doing this, that is, give yourselves a pat on the back. This is a big deal. You're taking your time. People are giving up their time on Sunday. Certainly the panelists and the people who actually watched us. Wow, that's amazing. That you're taking the time to really go into these subjects. Rabbi, be proud of the congregation here. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this. And next time, Matt, I'm going to tell a story that I also had as a soldier in Operation Defensive Shield way back when, where we gave assistance to a Palestinian family. That was quite moving. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Rabbi, you wanted to say something?
Okay, I want to say thank you to everyone for participating, because without you, this couldn't happen. And I think that if we can continue to keep the lines of communication open, one of the reasons, Henry, for the way that we did what we did was so that we all hear each other. So I'm going to tell you, I've heard everything that everybody has said, and we'll see what we can do moving forward. This is a work in progress, and I want to thank Cantor Schroen for helping with the technology and making this happen, so that we can all be together in one room and that everybody else can watch from another room. And it seems to have worked very well. And Josh, do you want to say something?
Just yasher koach to all for a really informative and eye-opening panel. It was terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I end with Eva? You want to say something?
No, I have to leave.
Okay, just 30 seconds, okay? And the 30 seconds is, we got to end with the words from the Psalms. Hinei ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Behold, how beautiful it is when brothers and sisters sit together, dwell together, share together, and feel the sense of unity in our people. I will be in touch with everyone, and we'll see where this goes from here. To all of you in cyberspace watching, thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Stay healthy and safe.